All right. Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first edition of Patronistas. This is a podcast both for Pochos and for Hispanics at home in the motherland to learn about things like economics, tradition, and basically a whole bunch of stuff. It's We're gonna host this. Me and Henry. My name is Klaus. Henry, how's it going, man?
All is well. I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm Henry. I'll be on with Klaus when we're doing podcasts on here, and I'll give my output. And yeah, so an introduction about me. My parents are from the Dominican Republic, and I'm from the Northeast, born and raised in the New York area, tri-state area. So basically, me and Klaus, we agree on many things, and we came to start this podcast, and specifically El Patronismo. And we want to talk to the viewers back home and the voices that are listening on the ideas we put forth. And we're also going to have live streams to listen to feedback and whatnot. So, yeah, that's all I got.
All right, cool. So let me do my intro. So hey everyone, my name is Klaus. Colombian, born and raised. Currently living in Florida. Currently studying in Florida, and I've been I've lived both in the U.S. and the Middle East, and I've kind of seen a little bit of everything. Been exposed to many different cultures, many different viewpoints, and something that I've kind of come to realize is that one, government is not the solution to most problems, if any problems at all, really, and that we need to start thinking more in terms of non-state based communities. We can certainly talk about why I came to that conclusion, but really the origins of this podcast come from an episode we did in the Pocho Hour, which is hosted by Noel OG del Rancho, as you guys may know, about Hope el Hispanista. It was the name of the episode. And in that episode, we discussed essentially why and how being Hispano does not necessitate being against quote unquote capitalism. Now, the word capitalism is a bit loaded. It's a very loaded term, which many people have issue defining. I guess including myself, I would put myself in that camp. But the main topic or the take home point in that episode was you can be pro Hispanos and not necessarily have the same economic views as Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, because there was kind of this false dichotomy that I witnessed in our circles, and I've actually witnessed it even more due to the Peruvian elections, that if you're especially if you're in Hispano-America, there is apparently no way for you to subscribe to sensible economic policy while at the same time having a pan-ethnic identity. It became essentially an impossibility, which I don't necessarily agree with, because again, due to the several experiences that I've had throughout my life, I don't necessarily think that's true. I do think that we can have something like Singapore, but maybe at a greater level, because obviously we're a much bigger landmass, and something like the United Arab Emirates, which is more specifically where I actually lived. I saw a lot of prosperity. You know, as someone who was in the middle class, I was nevertheless subject to a lot of luxuries, to a lot of things that being in Colombia, it would just never be possible. And so I kind of saw that very false dichotomous attitude and decided to reject it. Henry, I don't know if you want to comment on that. We got Macho in the chat, just repping the Dominican Republic. So he got the two Dominican homies.
Right. As Dominican, is always good to see Dominicans listening to what we're saying and what we're talking about and what we want to put out forth. Yeah, Klaus, I hear, like you mentioned, Castro, Chavez, Guevara. We're in English today, so I was going to segue into Spanish, but the impact that they had in Latin America and the influence it has with how we're taught about Latin America here in the States. I know, big topic in U.S. history is the Bay of Pigs and Castro and communism. If you go to Florida, Miami, you talk to Cubans, second generation, not third generation, plenty. They'll tell you about their experience in Cuba, how they grew up, and why they left. We're seeing that today with Venezuelans, and you're absolutely right. Dubai is a great example. Hong Kong is another example. Singapore, and we can bring, and what we're trying to do here is bring that perspective to the pochos here, and to what we can do in Hispano-America, and it would, yeah. I was gonna go on a tangent, but that's basically my response to what you were talking about.
Yeah, essentially, and actually, now that you mention it, Henry, I think we actually should do a version of this episode, but in Spanish. That way, I don't know if you want to do it within the same stream, and then whenever we decide to become a podcast, I'm gonna just cut it in half, and then put the English version and the Spanish version. Or if you want me to end the stream, and then we do another stream, just basically saying the same thing but in Spanish. Whatever you're into.
Whichever works, we'll hash it out post this stream, and both work for me. So, right. We were talking about communism and its leaders and socialism of sorts that we've seen in Latin America. I wanted to throw at Klaus, the examples in Latin America that we have of capitalism are really controversial, if we're honest, right? Would you agree?
Very, very much so, yes.
We have the Chilean miracle and Pinochet and the Chicago boys like Milton Friedman. And there's many disagreements about Pinochet, whether he was capitalist or not. In college, one of my economics professor would say that the Chilean miracle actually came after Pinochet, and from 1990 to 96. A lot of people get confused with that and its success. There's that, obviously, and then there's Panama City specifically. If you look at pictures of Panama City in the past 30 years, you'll see these massive skyscrapers. In fact, Panama City has the most skyscrapers. If you look at why it's been on the news in the past few years regarding the Panama Papers specifically, it's known as a tax haven in Latin America. Many leaders of both Colombia and Dominican Republic were on those papers. And right, that's also very controversial. So there's that, and there's also the outlook that me and Klaus want to give you, besides those two examples of what we can achieve in that region. But Klaus, if you have anything to say about Pinochet or Panama City, I don't know, Uruguay, right? It's interesting. I don't know much about it.
Right. So, I mean, I do have a couple of issues with Panama and Pinochet's Chile. However, we do have to be really honest with ourselves here, and we do have, like, all of us have to admit, just as a matter of objective fact, that Chile up until they changed the constitution very recently, was the most economically prosperous country in South America. As a matter of fact, I think Chile was going to be the first country in South America to be able to reach, what was it, a GDP per capita of 30,000 or something like that. So basically, it was going to be able to reach a level of prosperity that would be similar to that of Eastern Europe or Western Europe, just when they were reconstructing after the Second World War. Now, again, Chile does have some issues, even during Pinochet's time. Pinochet's Chile did not help Argentina in the Falklands War, which was a bit backstabby. And
True,
there's
of course. We can talk about that, but that's a discussion for a different day.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether the Falklands are British or Argentinian, but Pinochet had his shortcomings, right? The biggest one is the helicopter rides. I don't blame him. If you see where the neighboring countries were going through, he wanted to deter that falling into, seeping into Chile.
Exactly. But now let's talk about one of the positives that Chile has. It's a country where you don't see a lot of immigrants from. I mean, how many Chileans have you met in the United States? And compare that to the amount of Central Americans, Mexicans, other South Americans that don't include Chile. It's a country that has been able to be so economically successful that its citizens don't have to migrate out of it. The brain drain has essentially been far, if we can even call it a brain drain in Chile, has been much less severe than in other countries in South America. And
as a matter of fact, their biggest migration now is coming from Venezuela, and it's mostly the Venezuelan middle class who are going to Chile and setting up shop, and it's been it's been very beneficial to Chile, of course. They have competitive real estate, and they competitive in business, and they'll give you a shot, and especially in telecommunications and the copper mining industry. That's one of the most popular in the world, or something like that, right? Yeah. That's their biggest resource is copper, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So let me read a couple of comments from Don Paco Villa says, "Fuck communism." Mexicano says, "Capitalism is the best system." Gigi says, "My cousin was living in Chile and he left 2 years ago. He's now a teacher in New Jersey." Mexicano says, "Chile receives immigrants. They don't export migrants." Exactly. Now,
what's funny is that Mexicano says, "Henry knows, they trabajan la financia." Yes, it's true. The majority of the majority of the clients I dealt with are from, in Hispano-America, are mostly from Chile and Venezuelan migrants that are now living here. But the ones that are from the country that I've encountered are from Chile. One of the deals I was closing on, that it was diversifying Chilean assets. There's this big, not to go into great detail, but there's this big supermarket chain that was selling off to Walmart, and they wanted to diversify their assets. One of the biggest issues is that a lot of the companies in Latin America are run by families. That is true. But what I've come to learn is that Chile gives a better shot for class mobility than a lot of other countries.
Yes. And there's going to be a lot of criticisms socio-culturally of Chile. For those of you who hear this podcast and are more of an economically populist persuasion. And my counter to that would be that Argentina suffers the same fate so culturally is Chile, and it's way more economically populous. I would wager that the ghost of Perón has never really left Argentina since he died.
No, Macri tried. He couldn't win re-election, but Perón still lives today. I mean, the Kirchner family are the leaders of Chile today, right? Or Fernandez. Argentina was top 5 in national GDP up until 1910, when the English realized that Argentinian bonds were worth more than theirs, and the railroad industry that was growing. But so was Venezuela, right? In the 50s and 40s, right? Was one of the wealthiest countries that we come to know. Fortunate what they're going through today, but historically, there's been a rise and decline within the wealth in the region. Different countries at different times, of course, but that still exists today. I say the resource, talent, the knowledge is still there. Obviously, me and Klaus, that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is because we want to reach out to both the listeners and the ones here in the U.S. from Hispano-American diaspora and the ones at home.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys, whoever's watching this, in a couple of minutes, we're going to switch to Spanish, and we're going to pretty much repeat what we said, but in Spanish. So if you want to brush up on your listening comprehension, stay tuned, and we'll certainly help you with that, because this whole channel is also dedicated to helping Hispanos rediscover their language. Maybe not this podcast in particular, because this is going to be more of a listening podcast, but there's going to be Se Habla Español, which is a space where you guys can come in and talk Spanish with me. So Henry, so what do you want to do with the Spanish thing on this thing? Do you want us to continue, like, let's say we finish talking and then we just kind of like go in Spanish, or do you want me to end the stream and then we do another? Because every episode has to have a bilingual equivalent to it. That's kind of
course. What I mentioned is that we can set a full Spanish episode for. We can set aside a full Spanish episode on a different stream if we're going to release episodes on more formally. What I was saying for prosperity, for the 4 more episodes, one in English and one in Spanish, is what I had envisioned.
So sorry, what do you want to do?
We can end and run it in Spanish. That's fine with me. I think it'll just be cleaner and more concise for both the listeners and us, right? Would you say that?
So you want to set the Spanish premiere for another date, or?
Sure. I mean, I don't mind, but I think that's a better idea.
Okay, cool.
Well,
all right. So
cool.
We'll definitely do that. Maybe we can even do it tomorrow if it's not too late, because I do have to wake up early on Monday. So.
All good. Same.
If you guys want to tune into that one, we're basically going to talk about the same thing we're talking about here. And okay, so yeah, I was talking about the ghost of Perón. Henry, do you remember the episode? I think it was an asado where we talked about inclusive language in Argentina. Do you still have that article with you?
Oh, I can pull it up on Google. I know it was a Washington Post article.
Yeah, because there was a specific photo in that article that said something about Perón, and it had inclusive language, and it kind of made me laugh a lot, because Perón himself would not be in favor of inclusive language at all. but that's why a lot of guys on the Discord can't really understand why figures like Che Guevara and Chavez and Perón eventually become progressive left-wing symbols. Maybe not so much Perón in the first world.
Perón is more like third positionist more than anything.
Absolutely. But the thing is that, and we talked about this in the Hopel Hispanista episode. Third position fails because it is a mockery of hierarchy, and it lends itself a bit too much to economic populism. And the problem with using an economically populist message is that you eventually have to invoke some sort of notion of equality or some sort of notion of a Marxian dialect, even if you're not a Marxist. So let me explain what I'm trying to say. So people like Perón, and also figures like Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, who was I guess you could say the Colombian equivalent of Perón. He was a Colombian economic populist. You can even call him a pseudo-fascist. He was popular back in the 30s and 40s. He used a lot of economically populist messages and a lot of this sort of rhetoric of, I am the people's choice and I will go fight against the oligarchy and I will fight and I will, make it more fair, and so that message kind of implies that the lower classes should be more equal to the upper classes. Now,
in other words, like it's, as an American, we think of it as Trump saying, "I'm gonna go after those guys," and where he then becomes your leader, and then he's the one that is solving the working class's economic problems by whatever means he tells you he's going to do it by.
So the thing I'm trying to touch more on is that you eventually have to admit to the sort of class conflict narrative. And the thing is that nowadays, class conflict is not just strictly tied to economic classes. That's where the term cultural Marxism comes into play. So it's not just about the working class versus the upper class. Now it's, whites versus blacks. It's men versus women. It's cis versus trans. It's, whatever not queer is versus queer. So that's kind of where we come in and say any form of discussion of class conflict will inevitably lead to these socially progressive values that you guys hate so much. So you can't expect to use that narrative in economic terms to only then try to act like it can't be applied to social terms, because that's what a lot of people in the Discord say. It's like, oh, but like trans rights, that's a bourgeois concept and it's not true Marxism, and that's not what the working class is all about, and this and that. And what I'm trying to say is that, well, that may very well be true. You opened a Pandora's box to where you believe this narrative of an eternal oppressor and an eternally oppressed class. Now, again, this is not to say that there hasn't been corporate exploitation ever and that it's not a thing. Of course, it's a thing. Companies do, some companies around the world do have very bad and objectionable actions, and the way they do business is something that we should not condone at all. But you don't just then grab for the Marxist hammer and try to use that rhetoric. What you do is that you try to work within the system, so to speak. You sue the company, or you do a corporate raid, or you use the government to use some action against it, or you make your own company and you make this company irrelevant. Any sort of economically populist message will inevitably turn into social progressivism, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, that's just the examples we have, and we have seen in the recent past.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I wanted to explain why, people like Che Guevara, who was homophobic, then becomes a sort of modern day progressive hero, because he quote unquote fought against oppression. And who are you to say that gays don't feel oppressed in a heterosexual world? Now, again, whether you are pro LGBT or not, that narrative is still actually objectively true. If you are gay, a heterosexual society does feel oppressive to you because there are certain norms that you have to abide by, and a lot of these norms don't conform to who you are internally as a person. Same with being trans, same with being queer. And so these people look up to figures in history who have this sort of archetypical rebel against oppression model, and Che Guevara fits the mold, even if, again, he was a homophobe, right? That's why you have the so-called contradiction of homosexuals in general being leftists, and especially having very homosexual and trans and queer leftists being so pro Guevara, because it doesn't matter if he was homophobic. It doesn't matter if he thought that homosexuality was a bourgeois concept. He fought against oppression, and they feel oppressed, so therefore they're going to always identify him as their spiritual leader, their avatar, their guiding figure, whatever have you.
Well said. No, yeah, that's absolutely right. And in South America and in the continent, it's one of the few examples that we have of a leader that came about and got around like Che Guevara to nearly every Latin American country.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why we're in favor of hierarchy. We're in favor of meritocracy. So, I don't really believe in political dynasties, or I don't believe, that, just because your surname is, Uribe or Fujimori, you should get, high prestige. No, I totally believe that people should be able to fail. Like the rich should be able to fail, not get bailed out by the government, right? I think Henry would very much have a lot of opinions on that, wouldn't you say, Henry? I think you were.
Yeah, especially in the United States, the rich do deserve to fail, and it's unfortunate that we bail them out in crises, because then socialists come and Marxists, they come around later and say, "Hey, you bailed those guys out. What about us?" You're right. The government should have not bailed them out in the first place. It should have failed.
Exactly.
So there's that. There's especially in tech startup in the tech startup sphere, VCs will tell you that 80% of these companies are going to fail, and I'm not going to give you money unless I make 5 times the return of what I put in. Fair enough. We many times we're told the success story of like the social network, right? Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. There was plenty of Facebooks that failed during that time that we don't know about, that VCs put their money in and they didn't get a bailout from the government. But for the ones that succeeded, they're doing extremely well. I mean, we're on StreamYard, but there's also Twitter and Facebook that we also have, and you can find us there as well. But yeah, you deserve to fail. Well, not you, but some companies. most, actually, all companies do at one point, maybe.
Yeah, no company is permanent. Every company has to die, just like people, just like countries, just like a tree. Everything must come to an end. But actually, as a matter of fact, it's a very interesting topic you mentioned about 80% of companies, that type of thing. Because you're aware of zombie companies, right?
Zombie companies, like defunct companies.
No, so zombie. Actually, I forgot what a zombie company was. It was a very interesting topic, which really just validates what we're all about, really. In political economy, a zombie company is a company that needs bailouts in order to operate, or an indebted company that is able to repay the interest on its debt, but not repay the principal.
The principal, right? So it's like think of it as an insurance. Well, crony capitalism, right? Yeah, they got bailouts, and they become this thing that's too big to fail. So they're basically a zombie company just paying off their debt to the government. as opposed to, standing on your 2 feet and,
Yeah, pretty much. And that's kind of a big concern because some of these companies are like, these companies can't do anything. Like, they're kind of stuck in this sort of weird area where they have nowhere near the amount of money to pay off their whole debt, and then, have a business plan for the future and like move ahead and all that. But also, they can't really fail because they're so intertwined with government that them failing looks bad on whoever is governing at the time. So, last year,
GM is the best example that we have. Built out in '08. They haven't made a good car since the '60s. I guess what keeps them afloat here in the States is their F-150. They're lagging behind in EVs, that is electrical vehicles, but yet the government somehow finds a way to bail out GM when they need to. I think that's an example of the zombie company that we have. GM stays afloat because they outsource to Mexico and Canada, to build their vehicles. Obviously, the cost of labor down there is cheaper, but essentially, a zombie company.
Yeah, it's very interesting that crony capitalism also has a different, I guess you could say it's a synonym. I guess they're similar enough to be considered so. It's also called lemon socialism. Let me see if I can show you the Wikipedia page on that. Lemon socialism is a pejorative term for a form of government intervention in which government subsidies go to weak or failing firms. So basically companies that should be failing, but the government's let them survive for whatever reason.
Yeah, and you see it when certain industries become utilities. So like electricity would be an example of that. And Con Edison is that example. We can't let Con Edison fail because the grid goes out. But if they need a bailout, we have to build them out.
Yeah.
It's 70s and 80s. I guess it was more now we're even diversifying the grid. And if Con Edison fails, we'll more likely figure it out as opposed to bailing them out.
Yep. So yeah, that's kind of what we're about, guys. We don't care about these banksters. We don't care about these big corporations that suck off the taxpayer dollars to fund their failing business models. And I mean, a lot of those taxes aren't even being used to like innovate or anything. They're just literally being used to pay off not even the debt itself, just the interest on the debt, not even like the actual debt itself. So,
absolutely right. I guess lemon socialism would be Hugo Chavez and his relationship with PDVSA, the oil company that he always had an interest of bailing out, but the poor, on the rig lost their job and whatnot. So yeah, that's an example in the socialist society. I too big to fail for for the socialists, right? Chavez had to keep petroleum alive, so whatnot.
Yeah, never mind all the oil spills and environmental disasters that PDVSA has been involved with. We could certainly have an episode on that because there's a very interesting channel who had a video about, it said the conservative solutions to climate change, and by conservative he meant like American Republican sort of right-wing thing, because there's a lot of people who don't think that global warming exists, or that environmental degradation is not an issue, or that it's not important. And these people tend to be on the American right. And this video basically tells them like, hey, being in favor of the environment doesn't mean you have to be a socialist or like have to have massive, the carbon tax. Like, you don't have to advocate for that necessarily. there's other more market-based ways to solve environmental degradation, deforestation, climate change, if you believe in that don't necessarily involve big government. Things that you can do right now to kind of help with that. And I think it's also going to be one of the big focuses of this production. It's basically how to solve all the problems that the government tells you only it can solve by yourself or with your community. I think the Joven Hispanista episode was the gateway to that. I was mostly doing that topic of stateless solutions based in Spanish traditions, but I would certainly like it if we expanded on that a bit more. Henry's going to talk about this really interesting concept known as Próspera, which is a project being conceived in Honduras. And we're going to leave that for the next episode. So we're going to leave you guys a little, we're going to tease you guys with that. Henry, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. Just give them a little bit of a trailer, bit of a taste.
Of course. So, I was on Twitter and I came across this article about something called Próspera Honduras, which is basically this futuristic tech town that, brought a pot of land in Honduras, and they're building what I would say an ideal society based on good governance or very limited government. And I think in Latin America, one of our biggest problems is that we face challenges when it comes to the governments that we live under. So, there's corruption, there's crime, there's low wages. And to many extent, there's a brain drain if your government elects the wrong leader. Right now, we see it coming from Venezuela. Tomorrow, we're going to see it coming from Peru. I don't know. I can't foreshadow that, but it's possible. And this article I read has gained traction in the I don't want to say libertarian sphere, but more of closer to my ideology and Klaus's ideology than what we have today. And what more can I say, Klaus?
I think that's about it. I don't know if you want to wrap it up here and then let the audience know what's up, all that good stuff.
Let's see what we have to say. I mean, again, Próspera Honduras, for the audience, they can look up on Google what they find. But me, Klaus and I, we're going to go in depth into it. And we're going to talk about what they intend to build. And I prefer that as opposed to what we have today and whatnot. So, yeah.
All right. So that's dope. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate you coming into the premiere of Patronistas. And don't forget, we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about finances, economics, how to solve a lot of issues that the government tells you it can only solve for yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
We're here to help you guys. Oh, sorry.
No, what I wanted to say also to piggyback off that, we have a few interviews in the queue that we're working on.
Oh, yeah.
In regards to real estate. I have a friend in Ecuador that's in cryptocurrency, venture capital, things like that. And it's both going to be in English and Spanish. So if you only speak Spanish, it's going to be translated and all the information is going to be there for the audience.
All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. So, and with that, we're about to hit the 40-minute mark, which is a perfect time for an introduction. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And stay tuned, because I think we're going to have an asado after this one. What do you say, Henry? Should we just have an asado after this?
Of course, let's do it. For the audience listening right now, you can just translate over into the asado and yeah, we can shoot the S word there.
All right, sounds like a plan. That's dope. All right, thank you very much, everybody, and stay tuned for the next episode, and stay tuned right here, right now for the asado. So, thank you very much for tuning in, guys. God bless. Have a good one.